Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raw. I am your host, Matt Robertson, otherwise known as Grape Ape, joined by my co-host.
Stefan Strott, otherwise known as DM Bad Wrong Fun on a couple of those social medias.
And we have a very special guest tonight, the DJ LaBoss, Melson Schlapp. Am I saying that right, Brendan?
Perfect.
Melson
Nelson
Schlapp?
Slap. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Melson Schlapp himself, Brendan LaSalle. How are you doing, Brendan?
I am doing great. Thank you all so much for having me on your show, and I apologize in advance for all of the misinformation I'm going to spread to your viewers. No, I'm kidding. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm going to do our best to answer all y'all's questions as best we can. Thank you.
And during the stream, our video sound might be a little choppy. Elena's got a storm going on, so if you guys see it slow down at all, just stick with it. It'll probably pass in a couple minutes, but just in case you see it messing up. But anyway, Brendan, you are a creator for DCC. So we had some questions last week for Bob about creating stuff. There's some that's in the rule book, some that isn't in the rule book. Stefan, you want to hit him with those questions? And for everyone out there, we're using the 8th printing of the DCC RPG to answer our questions and dive for information.
Are you want me to hit him with some creative questions from last week?
Do you have the questions from last week?
Unfortunately, I don't. My computer situation's a little funky this week, so.
No, and you are, yeah, I forgot. So the first one was, when creating monsters, how do you determine a monster's hit dice, Brendan?
I think it's one of the beautiful things about DCC is that there are no rules for it. So I think you have to come up with your conception of what you want that monster to be like, how tough you want it to be, and how dangerous you want it to be for the setting that you're going to put it in, and then just try a number. Sometimes I'll go by, I'll take a look like creating a thing that's like, let's say I was going to do a zebra, say for example. I might okay, well, how many hit dice does a horse have? All right, a horse got 2 die 8. Zebra should have about 2 die 8. You know what I mean? They should be about equivalent for that kind of thing. But a lot of it is just sort of like feeling your way through it. Just sort of like you can look at what people have done before and use all of the monsters in the book for examples, but ultimately it's all up to you, the designer. I think for me, I want to create adventures that are in that sweet spot, that are just like, with I want, if players are smart and have a little bit of luck, I want them to barely make it through after a huge expenditure of resources and cleverness. You know what I mean? So, you just try to find that number that's there. I don't think that there's a formula to it more than that. I mean, but you also sometimes have to go, how tough is this thing relative to the other creatures in this room, but also the other creatures that are extant and out there. You do want to make things that are that don't make sense, that'll snap somebody out of the story.
What's your favorite, Brendan? Like one big, huge creature with tons of hit dice, or like kind of a swarm of little creatures, or multiple creatures with easy to kill and just kind of overrunning the party? What's your personal favorite?
I mean, I love a nice big I love a melee. I love a fight that spreads out and has little like side fights going on. So give me group of monsters versus group of players. But I think that the one giant monster versus a group of players, that's a classic. You know what I mean? Like there's something really to that. And like I really like the chaos of doing it like a mixed group like that. So I love a fight with I remember the example I got the most excited about in the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. It described a fight with one wizard and I want to say 10 orcs versus the players, and it was like, oh, that's so smart. I remember reading that at like 12 and going, genius. You just put another guy in there that can do other stuff, and then they have to. So, I love, especially like in my XCrawl stuff, like I love to put together a fight that's just like, 2 big guys, 1 little guy, a whole bunch of even littler guys, and then you just have to deal with them. Maybe a surprise dude somewhere, coming out of the woodwork. I love a good surprise dude.
I'll say I think from having played in a few of your games online, and actually a couple at LongCon in real life a few years back, one thing I've noticed, you love adding a ton of personality to your bad guys. You don't just want to, if you have a tiger, even if the tiger can't speak, you, Brendan, will like roar at the players at some point. And if they can speak any language, even if it's not gonna be like anything the players know, you're gonna like smack talk them in gibberish if they don't understand the enemy. So I don't know. That's
I mean,
art
yeah.
more than science, but like having your enemies come alive like that is sometimes more important than the stat block itself.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's clearly a balance. You can't like act all
Yeah.
big and bad, and then they take you out one round, and then you're like, well, what just happened? But yeah, I'm a big fan of. I'm not great at doing like specific voices, but I always try to describe things and then and show some sensory things in such a way that it makes it for a really memorable and high energy encounter. I go for it. I certainly do. Hey, what's up, Eddie? Eddie, I was just talking about you offline here. What's up?
All right. Well, our next question was, how do you determine a monster's critical hit dice? Do you just go with whatever the chart says in the book?
I mean, that's a good starting point, But I think that one of the beautiful things about having a algorithmic stat block is that you can it allows you to be more creative with it. I did a lot of stuff for 3.0 and 3.5 and Pathfinder in the old days. I know, right? You change something over here, and then you got to change it down here too, but also down here and down here and down here, and you could lose your mind. And sometimes that can be a really fun and interesting thing to do when you're young and have endless vistas of time ahead of you, But like, I'm much happier just saying, you know what, this monster is better at delivering critical hits. I feel comfortable making that decision, and every individual part of the stat block, I feel like there's nothing that you can't, doctor to make it more of the kind of encounter that you want to have, whatever that happens to be, hey, thanks, y'all.
Well,
So anyway, I think you should, use that as a guideline for a starting thing. But if you wanted to do, I've got an unpublished adventure. I have a dragon that is a fake dragon. Okay, and its fakeness is actually part of the clues. So I'm kind of, I gave it, it's like, it looks like a dragon, but it's not, and that's in the description there for the GM. So as a clue for the players, I just switched it over and gave it the monster crit table rather than the dragon crit table. So I'm hoping that a really observant player will go, wait a minute, that should have been blah blah blah, and it's like, yeah, what does that mean to you? You know what I mean? And like allow that kind of game intertextuality to be a clue. If that makes sense.
That's very interesting. Good idea. All right. Well, our last question was, and this is one that a lot of people struggle with because they know it's a part of the mechanic of the game. How do you determine a monster's fumble dice? There isn't really any kind of guidance for it in the book, but we did find a little snippet on the Goodman Games forum from like 2011, where Joe had stated like that he had anticipated that all monster fumbles were a D4. Is that how it was back in the day?
I mean, it's more or less how it is now if your monsters don't have armor on. But again, I will sometimes manipulate that. Let's say that you're doing, you want to do a monster that is intentionally kind of awkward. In the demo game that I run, one of the creatures there is he's proportionately strange. He's like big upper body and small legs. So I gave him a bigger fumble die because I just, I like the idea of him falling over more often. If that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think that's the way it's done. And I wouldn't mind seeing people making changes to that, certainly at their individual tables. And obviously there's Marzio's, monster fumble tables, which are fantastic, but I think that, it's one of those things. It almost doesn't go far enough, like, part of me wants to make a monster fumble table and like even take things off that are that would just be really detrimental to the monster, but that wouldn't necessarily change the flow of combat. You know, imagine you did a mastermind monster in a thing, okay, a mastermind villain, right? And on one of his fumble things, you got a unique table, and on a 3, he blurts out some part of his plan that is really important. Like lets a really good clue fly. That would be a terrible thing for him. You know what I mean? And it's not the same as him slipping and falling in a pool of blood. But I think that doing that kind of stuff and making it more customizable, especially for like a pre-published adventure, I think that's fun. And I think that's I think that kind of thing could be really interesting when you see it. Go beyond the regular fumble table. You know what I'm saying? Go and just try new stuff. I mean, obviously, if you make the whole thing ridiculous, it'll snap people out. People they should still be falling, breaking weapons, hitting their pal. But I think there's more you can do.
That's a great idea.
Nah,
It's kind of like there's some MCC like special artifact tables for the special unique artifacts in that particular adventure, and special. There's plenty of adventures that are like, and if you fail this save and you roll a 1, we got unique things instead of the generic things. So I think that's a fantastic idea for special fumbles for the villains and not just the players.
I don't think anybody would complain if you added, specialized fumble tables in the back of your next creations.
Well, yeah, I tried. So, XCrawl Classics is coming up at some point. That's all done and written and in the can. And I wrote this very long email, like, I would really like to do new critical tables and fumble tables for XCrawl Classics. Here's why. It was like a hard no, and it makes sense. It has to be compatible. You know what I mean? All the games, they have to be compatible. So, but that doesn't mean we couldn't do a special one for a special, encounter,
That's true.
I think, or throw some optional ones in some other yearbook.
Yeah, why not?
And we probably got to have one for a T-Rex with his little tiny arms. I mean, that's just fumble material waiting to happen.
Yeah. Imagine the maximum thing you give him, because he's a big, awkward thing. So imagine you give him a D16, and 16 is ironically killed by a meteorite. Like, just gets him. You're right in the middle of the fight. Yeah. Just, bow, like that.
All right. Well, we got some fresh questions for you tonight, Brendan. Stefan, do you want to hit Brendan with the first one? Elena, if you could bring up the
handout for question one. Yep. It is when using the dice chain and attacking at a higher die than a D20, what rolls will be the critical hits?
All right. So
you're using your D24 or D30. You get the picture.
Yep. So rules as written, since that's the theme of this thing, it's only the highest number on that die, adjusted if it is a character type that has a larger, they call it threat range, but since it always works, we shouldn't call it that. It's however, what I do personally is, if you're attacking with a D24 and you don't have a higher increased threat range, then I have you I have you critical on a 20 or on a 24. Okay, so not a 21, 22, or 23, but if you roll a natural 20 has to be a critical, or what are you doing? And, same thing but then 24, you should get something for getting that number. And if they jump up to a D30, then I give them a crit on a natural 20, natural 24, or a natural 30, with any increased range going at the very top shelf of that, So that's always been sort of like my house workaround for it. And I like the way that feels at the table. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? But yeah, as written, you just have a smaller chance to crit with a higher die, and
yeah. And so whatever the natural highest roll of that is. So Elena, if you could bring up handout 1A so we can show the viewers what kind of we're talking about. On page 12, it tells us right away that there's a critical hit matrix. Higher level characters and martial characters generate critical hits more often and roll on a more deadly result table. If we look at handout 1B, on page 42, this is kind of in the warrior description. In addition, a warrior scores more critical hits more often. At first through fourth level, a warrior scores a crit on any natural roll of 19 or 20. The threat range increases to natural rolls of 18 to 20 at 5th level and 17 to 20 at 9th level. So the warrior has a built-in bonus to his crit threat range. Where you're talking about is if you could bring up handout 1D, Elena. This is the page Brendan is referring to, page 81. When rolling a dice greater than a d20, a crit occurs based on the die's highest possible results. For example, when attacking with a d24, a crit occurs on a 24. A warrior with an improved threat range adjusts accordingly. For example, a threat range of 19 to 20 while rolling on a d24 becomes 23 to 24, with only the result of a 24 being an automatic hit. So I kind of feel, I totally see the point where you feel like you're kind of getting screwed because you're going to get a natural 24 less often. It's a less percentage of a dice, so you won't get a critical hit as often as you would with a d20. But you are getting a bigger dice, a bigger opportunity to hit in itself. So is that enough? Does it have to be both?
Yes. Otherwise, you are otherwise, then a higher die then is a benefit that is also a detriment. And if we're going to build that into the rules, I want a real good reason why, and I want to see how it's going to scale against everything else. We don't do that for any other scale checks in the games. They also have a hidden penalty. That makes sense.
That's a great point. Yeah, because all the benefits are meant to be benefits, and they're not benefits and detriments at the same time.
Yeah, like I always think about the old 3.0 D&D Barbarian. They had the only power in there that gave you a negative side. If you did Barbarian Rage, you'd be exhausted after it. And like Paladins weren't exhausted after they, smote evil, smited evil.
Evil was smitten.
Evil was smitten. Evil was smitten. You are lovely. I can't wait to meet again. It's you can't just penalize the one side of it and then everybody else is like, So that would make me a little crazy. I feel like just giving them the higher die isn't enough if it also messes them up on a certain level. Especially if you think about it, like I think there are a lot of things that absolutely you're not going to win, or you're at least you're the getting a crit, scoring a critical hit during combat on the player's side is like nigh essential in order to actually put things down, quickly. You know what I mean? To end the fight. And I think without that, it just gets harder and harder. And I think that it winds up actually penalizing. That would actually penalize warriors more than other characters in there, because warriors and dwarves, because you expect them to get that big crit and knock somebody down, but there's nothing on the other side of that for any of the other players. Now I'm okay with it giving you a less chance of fumbling, because
it's supposed to be a benefit.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a benefit, exactly. But imagine if you did it somehow, but it also gave you imagine you said, okay, you can roll a d30, but from now on a d30, you're going to fumble on a 1 or 2. Now you give them a benefit, but you really amped up the negative possibilities of that as well. I would be against that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Stefan, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, we established the by the rule thing. I think like by the book, it is pretty obvious, but people ask online because it does feel weird because of the lower percentage chance of critting, and yeah, I do the same thing Brennan says, and it's not an uncommon house rule for people to throw that into their games.
Speaking of that house rule, Elena, if you could bring up handout 1F, John Wilson has laid claim to that house rule. On Discord here by Grinstow, John has said the official unofficial rule for crits, aka the Wilson rule, is that when you go up the dice chain, you keep all your crits and add the new highest number. So exactly that.
We got the Deshane rule and the Wilson rule, and we'll figure out what comes after that.
Yeah, so John has laid claim to that one. One interesting thing that I did find in the book, if you could bring up handout 1E, Elena, on page 414, it's talking about giant crits. And so giants attack with staggering blows, and as such, routinely cause incredible amounts of damage. In game terms, giants attack with the D24 die, and they cause critical hits on any natural attack of 20 to 24. That also exceeds the AC. Brendan, how would you feel about the enlarge spell? When a character is enlarged to giant size, would you modify the crits to be 20 to through 24?
I would not, but that's just my instinct for GM talking. If I was on the other side, I might argue for it. But I don't think I would. I think that just being big doesn't make you a giant. You know what I'm saying? Giants are also exceptionally strong for their size. You know what I'm saying? So my instinct is no. But so let's see. Here's the difference. Now, if you just cast enlarge on somebody, which is the first level spell. And they got to be giant size. They got to be 12 foot tall. I would say no. But let's say you cast a third level spell, polymorph, and turned your boy into a giant. You know what I'm saying? Then that's the power of third level right there. I was like, yeah, absolutely, you're critting on that. It doesn't.
And you're using the giant crit table.
Using the giant crit table, get ready to pound someone down into the ground. Although it's tricky though. I think sometimes you just have to use equivalents for those things. Because in our example here, let's say the reason that Polymorph Wizard has put the spell on his buddy is because they're fighting other giants, and he's going to use that to try to equalize the fight. Now I got a 12-foot tall guy too. Get him, Mike. Now, I mean, he could be called Mike.
It's true.
But now, it's. I would have to, at the table, mitigate how giant criticals worked against other giants, because you're 12 foot tall, you're not pounding the other guy into the ground like they were a 3 foot tall or 6 foot tall human in front of you. You know what I'm saying? So I would give them the giant crit table, and then certainly the bump from rolling on a D24 and critting on a 21 through 24 or 20 to 24. But I think I would have to change the actual, at least the effects. You know what I mean? Of how it came down as far as the crit goes. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense to the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. So our answer to our first question is: when using the dice chain and attacking with a dice higher than a D20, what are the rolls that would be critical hits? My answer, rules as written, is only the highest number on the new dice. So if it's a D24, it's going to be 23, 24 for a warrior, 24 for everyone else. But yeah, I feel like using the other rule, the Wilson rule, is definitely the way to go. Stefan, how do you feel?
I'm exactly the same way with you. Rules as written, just the established amount, already determined. But D24 doesn't affect it really. It just moves what the numbers are. But in my own games, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to be giving that little crit bump so that our percentage stays nice. Using that Wilson.
Brendan, you get the final word on the subject. What is your official answer?
I mean, okay, I'm not giving you the official answer. I give you my answer. You know what I'm saying? You want the official answer? You put Joseph
not the official Goodman Games answer. The official.
We almost got him.
Yeah, I saw y'all wrote too. Somewhere, apparently, there's a clip of me from that someone has used as a rule example on Reddit someplace, like a video clip. I mean,
really?
That's official Brendan, but I would hate for them to be mad at the book because I'm doing it I don't even know what it's for, but someone described it to me. But I would say that if you don't mitigate the fact that you get a diminishing return on criticals if it's only the highest number on that die, I think you do a disservice to the players and a special disservice to your warrior/dwarf. I think that their big crit numbers and their great crit tables, I think, are built into the power level of those characters, and I think without it, I feel like they're a little bit hobbled. And it's fun to go to like if someone rolls a 30, I want to, that's or a 29 on a critical and they're a warrior. That's great. I want to see more crazy action in there. So I mean, I will say my official answer is I haven't heard any argument that would dissuade me from doing it my style, which is admittedly my house rule. But I think that's again one of the beautiful things about Dungeon Crawl Classics is that it's made for kit bashing, So
All right. Well, our next question for you is how is Infravision defined? What can you see and what can't you see with it?
that is a really interesting question.
This one kind of comes up a lot. And we'll start out with handout 2A, Elena. On page 52, we got some of the different characteristics for some of the demi-human classes. A dwarf can see in the dark for 60 feet. That's called infravision. So it says he can see in the dark. Page 57, infravision, an elf can see in the dark up to 60 feet. Page 60, for the halfling, halflings dwell in pleasant homes carved from the sod beneath hills. As such, halflings can see in the dark for 30 feet. Is your initial definition of infravision that they can see in the dark? Is it like grayscale? Do they see heat signatures? Well, what is it for you?
To me, the only question that really matters is can they read with dark vision or infravision? You know what I'm saying? Because no, seriously, that makes a huge difference. If you can read the inscription on a tomb or a scroll from or a page out of your spell book, that makes a huge difference. I don't. In my mind, it says they can see in the dark. They can see in the dark. I mean, but they also call it infravision. Which now this is what you have to decide as when you're GMing it. Is that just a throwback term? Are we using that because that's a familiar term that we use and that's like our little bit of a hey, we're old school, or is that why, or is it actually infra based? Is it actually based on heat? I just won't allow that to be a big deal. You know what I'm saying? I think I would just do it as the book says. It's dark vision. Maybe it's grayscale. But I haven't. Have either of y'all encountered a situation where the ability to see colors with infravision has been a factor?
Not colors.
So. Yeah.
But reading.
But
that
heat,
comes up all the time.
yes.
Well, heat is different. Let me ask you this: under what circumstances do you allow someone to use infravision? Like, how far away do they can they do it if there's a light source in the room? Like, if I have a candle that extends out to 10 feet, can the dwarf standing next to me see 50 feet beyond that in the dark?
Well, we've got some material from that in the book. I just recently ran Beneath the Well of Brass for the library group, and they wanted to look down in the well. And, of course, one of them is a dwarf. He's like, I'm going to use my infravision to look down in the well. How far do I see? So it comes up quite often. As I was researching this and reading it, and, probably a few months ago, I changed it to heat signature because I caught page 116, Elaine. If you can bring up handout 2B. On page 116, table 5.3 is the minor corruption table. So one of the corruptions for result 4 is the wizard's eyes, the caster's eyes are affected. And on a 3, the character gains infravision, and it defines infravision there as sees heat signatures at a range of 100. So that kind of threw a conflicting definition in my mind, and makes sense with the word infra. Stefan, what's your opinion?
I always this is what I actually tell people when they ask me in the game. I tell them, think of the predator. You got predator vision. So yeah, it's heat signatures in my games. It's like, is a goblin hiding around the corner in the dark dungeon? You're going to be able to spot the goblin because he is warm-blooded. Is a lizard man hiding around the corner? Well, he's cold-blooded. So, so maybe, but probably not. Is it a undead, ghoul or skeleton? Like, you're not going to be able to spot it, and you're not going to be able to spot that tripwire or that pressure plate. Like, those don't give off heat, so it's not helping you at all with that. Figuring out those is a separate thing entirely.
So they can only see living creatures that give off heat, and the rest.
Or like a burnt-out torch.
Yeah, see,
I mean, they can see like air currents a little bit, so that they can see like basic shapes, but like it's not going to be super helpful. They can see. I mean, they could figure it out from like air currents, I would say, because that's going to carry some heat. But I don't know that.
I feel like it's definitely a conflict with them saying they can see in the dark and then see heat signatures. Yeah. If you look at the spell Eakin's Mystical Mask. Elena, if you could bring up handout 2C. The initial result from 12 to 13 is the mask grants infravision, allowing the caster to see into the dark up to 60 feet away. So similar to cat's eyes, as eyes reflect cats, they see in the dark extremely well. But I would think that seeing in the dark for infravision, as it's defined, is more of a grayscale. They can see. I mean, that heat signature on the corruption table messes me up a little bit, but I've always played it as like grayscale.
But that's a very specific thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't say they can see in the dark, like the description for Dwarf and Infravision does. This is a corruption that is a very specific thing in my mind, which is allows you to see heat trails at a range of 100 feet, which is, you know, which is in some ways better and in some ways worse than dark vision, or, you know, than Infravision as is defined for the three non-human classes. You know what I'm saying? I feel like it's its own specific thing. And I think that it breaks the rules. You know what I mean? And the specific is always allowed to break the rules of the general in what we do. So, I mean, for me, I don't see that as I mean, obviously, it's a thing you could debate. But I would say that's not the same as a Dwarf's Infravision, just the way it's described in there, you know?
So is your definition of infravision that they can see in grayscale, or they see completely in the dark, like it's color, reading everything? What do you think?
I would probably say they can see objects, they can see grayscale, but I would probably not allow them to do certain things in the complete darkness, including reading. You know, I think it's one of them. You know, so I'm a little bit, you know, sometimes like dark vision can kind of ruin like adventures in some ways. You know, like, you know, you set up this whole, you know, this whole like spooky encounter where all the lights go out or whatever. Oh, one guy can see in the dark, so it doesn't, you know, doesn't count. So it's always made me a little bit crazy like that. But
that's why we need more magic fog.
Just put it in a thing. Fog.
And to speak to your point about light affecting infravision, Elena, if you could bring up handout 2D, page 417 in the Goblin description, it says they have infravision. They can see in the dark 60 feet and attack with a -1 penalty in bright light. Page 419, the same for Kobolds. They have infravision up to 100 feet, but suffer a -1 penalty in bright light. So that touched on the point that you brought up earlier about how far can they see beyond the light.
I guess a little bit, but I think that kobolds and goblins are different than these are creatures that are underground adapted, as opposed to like dwarves and elves who just have heightened senses, you know. So in my mind, like they get what was the old term, was dazzled, you know, in the bright light. It would be, you know, the only character class I could ever think in any edition of any fantasy game that allowed that was drow elves, an old, like, you know, first edition AD&D, where they had a hard time seeing in the dark, seeing in the light. So I mean, the way I play it is if there is light within their range, it spoils their infravision. That's the way I've always played it. You know, it doesn't make sense to me that you could have dark vision and light vision going on at the same time. So your eyes would have to adjust. You know, even if, you know, for whatever creature it is, you know. But
so I'm with you on that.
If you had an elf going down a dark hallway, you know, kind of scouting ahead, and he gets up to the area and the entire room flares into, you know, the torches come alight by themselves, would the eyes adjust automatically, or?
No, I'd screw with him for a minute. He'd be a -1 die for ranged attacks for a round or something like that. Like, give him a, you know, I think that would affect.
He's and we get our villain monologue.
Yeah, exactly. Aha! Now I have you, elf. You know, like I love the idea that, like, because I mean that would mess up a regular person with regular senses. You know, sitting. You know, I'll never forget. I used to work at Amazon. And if you can picture one of the CS areas, they kept the lights. It was this little underground thing. They kept the lights really, really low, so everybody only used their desk lamps, you know. And we're all in there working. And at one point, like, somebody comes in and flips all the lights on at once. And for the first time, that room glowed. It was like everybody, you know, just people were yelling, but you really couldn't for a minute there. You were completely and and if we're being realistic, it was probably 30 seconds of disorientation. It takes a little bit of time for your eyes to adjust. So, but I'd be comfortable giving him one bad round. You know what I mean? And just
Well, speaking more on if it's a throwback term or not, we have some throwback definitions. If you can bring up handout 2E, Elena. In AD&D, infravision is defined as allows the target to see infrared light, allowing them to note the difference in heat up to 6 feet away. Strong sources of heat, such as fires and torches, may blind or cast significant shadows, just as intense light does with normal vision, causing infravision not to function with such heat sources nearby.
Yeah. I got to point out one thing for us old schoolers. That 6 feet, that's actually 6 inches D&D scales. That's actually 30 feet.
6 inches. Thank you.
That's miniatures. You know what I'm saying? Like that's, you put your ruler down there against your minis. That'd be a 30 feet.
Got it.
I'm old.
Thank you for that.
Good.
Well, and I got it up on a little thumbnail, so I missed the other quote there. Handout 2F says in D&D 3rd edition, they switched it to dark vision and low light vision. Yeah. So dark vision, dwarves can see in the dark up to 60 feet. Dark vision is black and white only, but it's otherwise like normal sight, and dwarves can function just fine with no light at all. Handout 2G, D&D 3rd edition, low light vision is what elves had. An elf can see twice as far as a human in starlight, moonlight, torchlight, and similar conditions of poor illumination. She retains the ability to distinguish color and detail under these conditions. So in previous iterations of the most popular game for right now, we've got definitions for infravision, dark vision, and low light vision. My answer to the question, how is infravision defined? What can you see and can't you see with it? I'm going to go with the D&D 3E dark vision rule. Dark vision is black and white only, but otherwise it's like normal sight. I think when the book says that dwarves, elves, and halflings have infravision, they can see in the dark, I think that's what's intended. Stefan, what's your answer?
I'm still sticking with the heat-based thing just because the name is infravision. So, and their ability to see their surroundings is going to be based off of the fact that, air is going to be a somewhat different temperature than the stone next to it.
All right, Brendan, you've heard the arguments. We've got 2 opposing opinions. What is your ruling on this question?
My ruling would be that it just says they can, the book says they can see in the dark. I would say, I have no problem in defining that as being colorless vision, being just everything seeing in black and white. But I wouldn't make it heat based. I wouldn't make it where, because I can just picture the fight I'm having at Long Con with some. It says I can see in the dark. The tripwire didn't. It says I can see in the dark. You know what I mean? So, you got to go by that. So, to me, I think there might be smallish things. The ability to read is the one that, I don't know. I sometimes I think about it one way, and sometimes I think about it another. But I don't think I would make it heat based. I do love the idea that they're all walking around with predator vision. You know what I mean? But you see, if you let them have predator vision, they're going to say, "Well, I'll telescope in 10 times. How can I read it now?"
No, that's only because the Predator had his fancy, add-ons. You don't have that.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah,
that's supposed to be a handout. Why didn't you do a handout that was just the Predator, Matt?
Yeah, Matt.
Sorry,
that's your real name.
I should have been on that. So rules is written, Brendan. What can they see with infravision?
Rules is written. They can see anything. It's dark vision. They can read. They can tie their shoe. They can go. Oh, did you color your hair to another dwarf underground?
Hey, there you have it, folks. Stefan, you want to do the last couple questions?
Sure. So one of our next rule, it is when using the Cleric ability, turn Unholy, what constitutes an unholy creature?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a rough one, isn't it? So Okay,
It
so
is a rough one. There are some definitions in the book under the cleric class.
yeah, it has it all. It's all broken down there for you.
But if you're a chaotic cleric, you're kind of getting screwed over because, I mean, how many monsters are actually going to be lawful that you're fighting? Handout 3A, if we look at page 30 in the book, turn unholy, a cleric wields his holy symbol to turn away abominations. At any time, a cleric may utilize the spell check to deter unholy creatures. An unholy creature is any being that the cleric's scriptures declare unholy. Typically, this is undead, demons, and devils. So there it gives us a pretty clear definition. It's whoever's unholy against that particular cleric's deity. What's your opinion, Brendan?
I mean, okay, so to me, rules as written. Okay, I think that first off, it would certainly have to be alignment based. Okay, so I wouldn't let even if a lawful hero encountered a lawful monster and they had a conflict, I wouldn't say, well, you can. He's like, I'll try to turn him. You can't. That's not one of your. He's not on your list. You know what I'm saying? Even if even if he's whatever. For like, imagine you drew a line in the sand and said, okay, just like because we keep going back to AD&D. All right, this is the line. And if you're chaotic and you're from the underworld, you're a demon and you're on that side of the line. And if you're lawful and you're on the, you're a demon from the underworld, you're a devil and you're on the other side of the line. I would say if you were going to draw that distinction, and let's say for a particular adventure, I would say that a lawful cleric couldn't then turn devils. They might want to kill each other. They might be out to ruin your life and everything, but there doesn't necessarily place them on the other side of the cosmic axis as you. Now that's just the generic thing. The best thing would be to actually sit and define what every god in their particular scriptures finds unholy. And I don't think that there's I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. I think that would be a great thing to see at some point. Because one of the things that you can do is monsters. That's listed on there. You know what I mean? Oh, you can turn monsters, but I don't like that they can turn every monster. But I could definitely see some monsters being able to be turned. Imagine that you are a cleric of I'm trying to think, like Justicar. All right, and maybe not every monster on there, but like things like Dark Stalkers, things like specific murdering type things, specific like law breaking type monsters, or things that were or it wouldn't even have to be thematic. It could just be things that the church has beefed with in the past. You know what I'm saying? Like the blue dragons came down from the mountains and they burned down the villages, and the Justicars, we stood against them, and now Blue Dragon shows up. I don't care what alignment it is. You can kick it out of the bar. So I think that it would be ideally you would go through and actually break down and say, what each one, what the specific tenets were of any given faith, and that would allow you some opportunity to do some really interesting bits and bobs. Now, of course, part of the problem there is once you start defining what monsters are or what monsters can be turned, you run into every monster in DCC is unique situation. So, I don't use monsters twice typically in DCC. So you wouldn't, maybe you could, actually work those into the monster description, So for a given, that might be a thing that the GM would have a consideration of beforehand. And then how do you tell the players? So maybe it's like, you create a new monster. I'm creating a dungeon here, and I'm going to call them blue meanies. The blue meanies are down there, and they're real evil. Everybody hates them, but they're really awful to animals. They're animal tormentors, and because of that, neutral clerics who follow any of the earth, moon, sky gods can turn those specific things and build that into their description. I mean, I think that's a cool way to do it.
I like your idea of ever since the last crusade, now we can get these guys too. I like that.
Yeah.
I definitely think that needs to be something in DCC Annual number 2. Elena, if we bring up handout 3B, we've got the list right there of the unholy creatures in the cleric description. For lawful, undead, demons, devils, chaotic, extraplanar creatures, monsters, just like you said. Now, to your point, I agree. It should only be lawful monsters. Would you let them chaotic monsters? I'm sorry. If it was a lawful monster, they wouldn't be able to turn it, like a goblin or
A
those
sphinx.
more humanoid
Hobgoblins. Yeah, Sphinx. Sphinx is a good example. You know what I'm saying?
But the problem I have with that list is the chaotic clerics can't even turn undead, and every cleric you think of, that's like their main go-to from all the way back in the day, is they can turn undead. So that's the only part that hangs me up a little bit. Stefan, what do you think?
I think we need to remember that DCC provides great examples of what lawful people of like the different classes would be. So chaotic clerics, they can turn a lot of not any thief, but a lot of the thieves who are going to be Thieves Guild members, because that is kind of baked into the what is a lawful thief description. They're going to be able to turn the town guard. So I think chaotic
That's
clerics,
powerful. That's super powerful right there.
they're like they might be more at home in a city-based campaign than a dungeon-based campaign.
Yeah.
Or Lankmar campaign.
Just an anti-law campaign, like where that's specifically what you were doing, I mean,
the chaotic cleric shows up in Lankmar where there's no clerics at all. See what happens.
We just call it Punjar, use all the same modules.
In handout 3C, we get a little bit more leniency. On page 96, it says, by wielding his holy symbol and uttering holy words, a cleric can turn away enemies of his faith. So it gives you a little room. Any enemies that are fighting you or hostile to that particular deity, then you should be on the turn list. So you can kind of create your own. A cleric can attempt to turn away undead, demons, and devils. Some clerics of particular faiths may be able to turn away other kinds of creatures depending upon what power their deities award them. And then, let's see, if we go over, I looked through some of the spells, so then you got to kind of determine what is evil for your cleric. Handout 3E, if your detect evil spell for a cleric holds up his holy symbol and detects emanations of evil within a ray that extends straight out 5 feet wide and 60 feet. And that definition of evil is based on the cleric's alignment. Generally encompasses creatures of opposed alignment, those unholy to the cleric's deity, and those with clearly harmful intent. So, Brendan, where it kind of specifies if it has clearly harmful intent, would you let a cleric of any alignment try to turn something with clearly harmful intent?
Absolutely not. Sorry, let me expand on that. Just because it is evil to you at that moment doesn't necessarily mean you would have people turning arrows and pit traps and all kinds of, people will be trying to, capitalism. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think you have to draw a line with that. I mean, detect evil is what it is. Detect evil as written, detects traps, detects deadfalls, and stuff like that, and I'm fine with that. But I wouldn't say necessarily that anything that registers as evil to that spell would be something that a cleric could then turn. I think that way lies madness. You'd be turning your cousin when he came over to get his car back. You know what I'm saying?
Unholy creatures are a big part of a cleric's identity, though. So I went through the book, and you've got blessing, detect evil, protection from evil, divine symbol, spiritual weapon, affliction of the gods, sanctify, vermin blight. In some of the descriptions for the abilities of creating magic swords, it all mentions unholy creatures. So it's a big part of their identity to identify what is unholy to a cleric.
I've got an interesting situation. So it did say enemy of the faith at one point. What if let's say we got two lawful clerics or just two lawful, groups, Justica, and Danthar. Those are the two sides. The two sides, they are arguing, they're fighting over a relic that both sides claim is theirs. And they're going, no, you stole it. No, you stole it. And Are they an enemy of the faith at that point? Because it's like, no, that is our holy relic. You must give it back, and in not giving it back, you are an enemy of the faith. I mean, they're still both lawful, but how does that roll? Besides, it depends.
I would be hard pressed to let people turn other lawful clerics with that. I mean, this just sounds like we're beefing right there. But let's say instead it's a holy war. No, you know what I'm saying? It's like that's like three of us in the dungeon. There's three of y'all in the dungeon, and we're mad. But let's say it's a holy war, which has now been declared. Like they actually do a ceremony. Okay, like we declare the Church of Bob over here to be an absolutely unholy faith, and we're going to do a ceremony, and we're going to chant, and we're going to pray, and we're going to put it all out there in the line. I think it would take something that specific in order for me to be satisfied that another lawful faction, or even a lawful, not a faction, but like a lawful, or a faction's even interesting. You know what I mean? Imagine it's Secretariat. Imagine it's like, you know what I mean? The Reformed Church of Babubga Bills is gotta go, or whatever it happens to, you know what I mean? Whatever it happens to be, I think that it couldn't just be casual. You couldn't be mad at that one guy that day and decide he wants this thing that I want, so I'm turning him. But if this is something ongoing, if that's the conflict, then then between alignments, I would think it would have to be, when they actually declare a holy war, it's a whole thing they have to do, and there's prayers and invocations and things. I think you would have to, a papal bull, something that equivalent would have to come out. Like the highest authority in your religion would have to say, this is what we're doing. There would have to be a ceremony involved with that. And since the deities can directly intervene in this thing, you would have to have at least their tacit approval, if not their, you know what I mean? If not, an image of the god shows up over your temple. It's like, go get them, show those Bobians, whatever's up, So, yeah.
Brendan just started a war with Bob.
I mean, I'm actually the Church of the Subgenius Pope of Salem, Massachusetts. So, obviously, I'm biased. So there's that. But
we do have one handout. I found a little clip from JG in the Goodman Games forum. Elena, if you could bring up handout 3.
Heavenly Father, what's this going to be?
He says, I wanted alignment to be felt in the game without being a major element, but it should definitely be felt and require more thought than it has in modern years. This was back in 2011. As for clerics, he talks a little bit about patrons and chaotic and lawful wizards. But then he goes on to, as for clerics, their alignment determines weapon choice and what they can turn. Clerics can turn unholy creatures, not just undead, and the definition of unholy is defined, of course, by what their deity considers holy.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, it needs to kind of be defined. If you're running a campaign or something like that, that would be your best bet to find what unholy creatures are for your cleric player.
I think it's a great thing to do, and break it down. All right, you can't turn monsters in general, but you can turn, beast men. You know what I'm saying? Whatever it happens to be that you want to, introduce. You know what I'm saying? And then if it comes and I could see dealing with specific situations with a luck check, and that's it's a little haphazard, but you know what I mean. If it's really I don't know, imagine that you are going to do a campaign that is specifically going to deal with the ramifications of sailing, the after effects of the sailing on the Starless Sea. Okay, so you say your one cleric, whether player, his character has leveled up to first level. Now he's a cleric. He's going to be this faith, and you say, aha. So one of the things in your face is that you can turn beast men. Okay. You actually write that down there. If they make it to the purple planet and they're like, Kit's kind of like a beast man, isn't it? I'm gonna try to turn him. I'm just gonna see what happens, I would literally have them make a luck check, and if they made it, you write it down on the paper because Kith are officially on the naughty list. I wouldn't have a problem doing that because you just can't cover absolutely every situation, every possible permutation of cleric versus monster in a game like Dungeon Crawl Classics. Not with all the world jumping and, dimensional this, that. You just can't. So,
All right. Well, our official raw answer is when using cleric ability turn unholy, what constitutes an unholy creature? Stefan, why don't you go first this time?
It depends, but go off that chart in the cleric class section. It's going to be the most accurate, most well-documented thing you can get.
My answer, rules as written, is the chart in the cleric description of the unholy creatures until we get any more further material, like a DCC second annual, and it gets defined. Those are the unholy creatures. Brendan, you get the last word. What is it?
Well, I think go by the chart, but customize that chart for individual deities. You know, if you're a cleric of the moon, then you should be able to turn moon goblins, but maybe not regular goblins or whatever it happens to be. You know, moon goblins is a thing, Stefan. You can look it up. Okay, so
Yeah, I've heard tale.
you don't want none either. They're heinous. They slide down on ropes from the moon, steal stuff, run away.
All right.
They
Well, our
cheese.
last, Stefan, what's our last question for the night?
All right. Yeah. Our last question is: during a player's action, can they split up their movement, do it a move, attack, finish moving?
And what's your ruling on that?
I mean, I saw that on your question list there. That seems pretty clear. That's a hard no, basically. And the only time I would allow that would be if they, well, okay, I can see two ways I would allow it. I would allow that as part of a mighty deed. Okay, so imagine the warrior's like, all right, here's my mighty deed. I'm gonna run over and attack this guy. My mighty deed is I'm gonna keep running and go 20 more feet. You know what I'm saying? So, haha, get some. Samurai style. That would be cool. And then at which point I would be like, all right, make it. And then if you fail to hit, you just stop. Your movement stops at that person. If you hit but you fail to make your deed, you stop. But if you make it, you can keep going. And like I would graduate it, like if you roll a 3, you can go like 5 feet beyond him. If you roll a 4, you can go to the full amount of your movement rate, maybe. You know what I'm saying? And 5, you do it and look really good, and there's leaves falling from the trees like a samurai film, like it's all beautiful. You know what I'm saying? Just like work it. I don't know. But let's say someone just wants to try it. You know, like, all right, I'm a wizard. And what I want to do is, imagine this particular scenario, there's a pedestal there with a gem on top of it, and the gem's important. It's our MacGuffin. So the wizard's like, all right, I'm coming through the door in the east, but there's a door in this, or a passageway in the east. There's also a passageway in the south wall. While this battle's going on, I want to run over this round, grab the gem, and then keep going and I'm going to grab it and keep going. You know what I'm saying? So rules as written, you can't do that, but it might be a cool thing to do, and it's not impossible. So I would just make it challenging. You know, I would be like, all right, you can try it, but and this is how I would scale it. I would say you can try it, but it has to be harder than a warrior trying to do it with a deed die. Okay, so they've got to have a smaller chance to pull it off than as if it was a warrior going in to hit the target, like in my first example. Does that make sense? So, got to get a 3 or better in your deed die in order to pull it off. So, I mean, I would have them have to make that run over there, and then maybe a agility check to pull the maneuver off, and then maybe even on top of that, a luck check that it doesn't go haywire somehow. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, you can do it, but as you run past this guy, he's going to get a free shot on you, or something like that. You know, but I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I would want to make it a very, very specific circumstance with some real ugliness on the backside if they mess it up somehow. If they want to try it, you know, I want my players to try to do crazy stuff in game. I want them to do interesting things like that. But I also want, if they try something like that and fail, I think they gotta feel it, you know? Does that make sense?
I totally agree with your raw definition, your raw ruling, and I love the thing of Mighty Deeds. I had thought of that as well. Elaine, if we bring up handout 4A to show everybody what we're talking about, page 77 says, a character has 1 or more actions each round, expresses action dice. They get higher action dice at higher levels. Each round, a character or monster may move its normal speed and do 1 thing for its action dice. They can choose to move again, and that's how we know of, double moving, taking their action dice as another full movement. But if we bring up handout 4B, It further defines it on page 77 by giving us example. A normal 0-level character with 1 action can move and attack once each round. It doesn't say they can split them up. And it goes further to define it. A 6-level warrior with action dice of D20 and D16 can do any of these following combinations in 1 round. They can move only, they can move once and then attack once, or they can move, then attack once with their D20 and attack with their D16, or simply stand and attack with their dice. It doesn't say anything about breaking it up, but I think everybody coming from other systems, they're so used to being able to move, act, and move. Sometimes it's a big hurdle to give over. What do you think, Stefan?
I'm with you. You can't break it up. I would accept and maybe do some agility checks or something, with the added exception maybe of mounted combat, which just doesn't come up very much. But we all know we've all seen a bunch of movies where a knight is going by, he's got his lance, he hits the guy, he keeps going. So I think in mounted combat, there's some clear exceptions. I don't know if I would just allow it or if I'd add an extra rule though.
Though, in the mounted okay, not to break in, but if it's cool, in mounted combat, you have another factor, which is the creature, the mount, that has its own movement, action economy. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you're just on the horse, and your attack is, when I get close enough to hit this dude, I'm going to go for it. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
I think you have to allow that. And then it's like, well, the horse just does his thing. I do my thing when I get there. And you got to decide, well, do you give the guy on the ground a free shot at him as he goes by, as if he was riding out of combat? I think you kind of have to. But for a lance, for a joust, I wouldn't. If it was 2 lances.
I think in general, if it's a guy on the ground you're attacking, I'd let him take a free shot, and I just do I'm not sure if I would give him just 50-50 chance, or I would say, yeah, but you're attacking the horse, let him, choose. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I might give him a minus because, the guy on the mount has the higher ground, and as we all know,
yeah.
There are some actions that can be included with the movement action. Handout 4C, it shows the table that with actions that can be included with the movement: drawing, sheathing a weapon, equipping or dropping a shield, opening a door. Those can all be included as part of your movement action. Anything else, they gotta kind of stop their movement and perform the action, and then their turn's over, in my opinion as well. I did think of one other circumstance, though, Brendan. Lane, if you could bring up handout 4D. If someone cast a haste spell on someone, and the result was fast enough where they gained an extra movement. So, like 22 to 23, the caster gains double movement speed and 1 extra action dice. In that instance, I would let them move, act, and then moved again, because they're hasted. It's essentially they're acting twice. Would you let that one fly?
I'm going to the book here.
All right.
I think I would. I think I'd still let the withdrawal free attack thing go off, but I'd let them use their extra movement after an attack.
Speaking of the withdrawal free attack, after in Brendan's example, where they were doing a mighty deed and the warrior ran by, hit, and then want to continue running, would that warrior get the hit, withdrawal attack?
No,
Depends how good his deed is.
No, they weren't in melee before that. They weren't in melee combat.
As soon as they swing, they're considered to be in melee. Oh.
So the warrior goes by, he swings, and he's in melee, but he's out. I think he'd be out of there before that guy gets his chance to go. I had to think about that, but I think that part of that deed would be him, although maybe you work that into the number. You know what I'm saying? Like on a 4, he still gets an attack on you. On a 5, he gets an attack. You're withdrawing from combat, free shot, but he only gets to roll a d16, and beyond that, he doesn't get one at all. Maybe there's a way to figure that out. But to me, it seems like the warrior example, he's moving at you. You're not in melee yet if you're the target. He takes that shot. Next round, it's your turn. Okay, now you're in melee, except he's gone. is how I would interpret that. The haste one, I think I would make you spend your second action die on that move. So you could run over, use your action die, and then use your second action die to get out of there. Why? Okay, get why?
Oh, like
Stingy,
spend the
stingy
whole
judge,
second
stingy
minute
judge.
on the avoiding the withdrawal free attack.
And you would, yeah, it's magic. You would avoid everything. You know what I'm saying? You know.
All right.
I'm just teasing you. Well, I did find a clip on the forum of someone named Gnome Boy. I have no idea who that is, but they had a pretty good idea. I like this idea. Each action die being able to support some portion of the total movement. So once they get to high enough level, you know, their muscles are refined, they're more skilled. Once they get 2 action die, they could split their movement up into 2. Once they get 3 action die, they could split their movement up into 3 portions. I thought that was a cool idea. Not rules as written, but a pretty cool idea.
I want to test that out before I ruled. Before I ruled on that. That sounds like unstoppable killing machine running up and down the thing. Which maybe you should be at 8th level. You know what I'm saying? I'm not ruling it out. You know what I mean? Like an 8th level fighter should be should be just completely horrific. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I want to test that. But that sounds interesting to me.
Yeah, I thought so as well. Thank you for the subscriptions, Lupus, Malum, Ghostly Squid, and the one that you gifted out, Brendan. Thank you guys very much for that. So our final answer, rules is written. During a player's action, can they split up their movement? Stefan, you go first.
Nope.
I say nope as well. It's either move and act or act and move, but not split. Brendan, what is your final answer?
Saying move and act or act and move, but if you had a second movement die, I would let you burn your action die on a second move if you wanted to do it that way. You know, but I wouldn't let you go faster than your full movement rate in any case.
All right, there you have it, folks. Thanks for joining us for another wonderful episode of Raw. I hope we answered some of your burning questions. Brendan, I know you can't tell us anything you're working on. You are working on stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah, I can't,
Can you
yes.
tell us if it's in DCC, MCC, Lankmar? Can you tell us what genre it's in?
No.
Can you tell us where we might be able to get in on a playtest, perhaps a convention of some kind?
Why, yes, I will be. Well, this particular weekend coming up, I am going to be at RinCon / Arizona, or let me get the exact name so I don't mess you guys up. It's RinCon this year. RinCon has combined with Tucson Comic Con, and they're doing a combined event in Tucson, Arizona. So I will be there this weekend, and I will indeed be playtesting some things that. You know, but I'm running a lot of stuff, so who knows? And who knows what those genres are going to be? And I'll also be at, I'm also going to be this year at Con on the Cob for the first time, playtesting things, yes. And likewise, I'll be at Game Hole, one of my all-time favorite conventions. And yeah, I'll be some different things that I haven't. I'll be playtesting some different things there that I'm not even the things that I'm even hinting about now. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I wish, guys, I really wish I could. But
you're coming down to Texas to hanging out with me and Stefan too, right? You're coming to the LongCon?
Oh yeah. I did not mention LongCon. I will be at LongCon.
Yeah.
I think, you know what, I'm not even sure what I'm running. Yeah, and I'm running
It's like 2 months away.
Yeah, at least one of the games I'm running at LongCon is a playtest for a future thing. I will admit, LongCon, I was excited, and I'm running some greatest hits at LongCon for reasons.
Lana, if you could post the link up there for LongCon, if anybody's interested. It's going to be happening in November here in Texas. If you guys can make it down, myself, Stefan, and Brendan will be there. Stefan, what do you got coming up? Anything?
Not too much. I'm just running some games online. I sent actually I did send off a manuscript for a zine I'm hoping to have come out early next year. Sent that off to Mr. Jeff Seifert, a wonderful editor.
Outstanding. Well, I've got the Reaver Express coming up on Friday, so if you guys tune in to the Goodman Games official Twitch channel, you'll see me and my players as I try to bring them through all kinds of different antics. Brendan, do we have a date on when XCrawl is coming? An official date yet?
I do not have an official date on when XCrawl is coming yet. We are still at the mercy of the current state of the the publishing
World.
So yeah, the whole thing. It's all.
Well, I'm hoping for a very XCrawl Xmas. So.
Thank you. Me too.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Brendan, thank you very much for being a guest on the show.
Thanks for having me. I had a good time.
We hope to have you on again in the future, and we'll see everybody in 2 weeks, where our guest is going to be Daniel Bishop.
Tune in.
Make sure
Hey,
you turn in.
one thing I want to mention, also at LongCon this year is going to be himself, David Beatty. So, come and roll some dice. If you don't come to see me, come to see David, because he's amazing.
Hopefully,
Put
he'll be
your
bringing some extra
Frontiers
copies
back
of
in
Weird
the back of your
Frontier.
truck. Yeah, get it signed.
Pop your front wheels up.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. We'll see y'all in a couple weeks. Thank you.